Hello and welcome back to Parley. This prompt was written by PistilWhip. Hope you'll enjoy listening. It's about what is communication, really. It's a follow-up to a previous Parley. Totally timely follow-up to last month's Parley about communication. Captain mentioned missing some things, like the legendary Project Moon-flavored remix of Hakoda's Outburst and the subsequent parallelisms that arise. Of specific note is this comment by me. Some specific parts of both the meme version and the actual version are fairly compelling questions, like also to the Chuni people saying them. Okay, this requires a little bit of background. So this parlay is a follow-up, sort of, to the previous parlay about the kind of legendary I can't understand what you're saying rant from when supernatural battles become commonplace. If you look up I can't understand what you're saying and look for an anime girl who looks distressed, you will find the clip. And I will put a link to the meme version in the description because it is funny. I thought it was funny. If you've played Limbus Company, I think you will think it is funny. I missed it in the only literal sense. Like, I didn't see it when I was doing the parlay, and because you put it into a thread on the side, and sometimes I time those wrong with when I read the parlay and then the thread is there. But I don't have anything to say about it. I do have probably a chunk of parlay worth of things to say still, if you want to still talk about this subject. So let's read on. But first, a very brief definition of chunibyo, or chuni-isms, translated often as something like middle schooler syndrome. The idea is that these are kind of edgy things that you say to get attention, but they mean nothing. You know, the black flame dwelling inside of my eye burns with hatred. You don't like something, I guess, is what you're saying. It's kind of... There's a lot, and so we're going to talk about it during this parlay, but that is the type of subject that we're referring to. I will try to give you examples here and there when they're appropriate, and probably fail. Let's get into it. PistilWhip wants to start with a theory from mine own dark past about the rationale behind some Chuniisms. Like, why say these things? The point is not to be understood, but to be noticed or remembered. While Chuniisms may or may not have significant information content, the exoticism tends to draw attention, especially when combined with, for example, unusual fashion choices, eye patches, bandages, etc., and exaggerated posing. I can't really do a good one while sitting down, but Chunibyo can also be a form of escapism, both in the sense of I want to be part of more than a mundane world, and I want to be recognized as a member of a less mundane world. Therefore, making meaningless chuni noises causes some superficial engagement from passerby until it becomes background noise that can be tuned out. And then there's another part I'll get to later. Yes, I have kind of a way to begin this parlay, which I think you had a really good start. I had kind of taken it as a given that the point of the things being said is, of course, to get attention. You know, it's attention seeking, of course. And then taken it as a given that it is pointless to do that because it's not real attention. It's sort of inherently pointless. I feel like the defeating thing about people who just kind of make a lot of noise to get attention is that if they understood why, like what they wanted, which is attention, they would stop doing the thing that they were doing. I suspect I probably said something like this in the previous parlay. It sounds like something that would have come up. But I wanna flip it around a little bit, because the implication that it's like bad to get attention, there's a couple of problems. I mean, the first one is, well, what is everyone else doing? I mean, they're also just doing things to get attention, sort of. I mean, you can live in a way where you're not just attention seeking, but what I mean is, you know, I'm thinking about like when I was in college, there was an anime club, and it was not an anime club about enjoying watching anime. It was an anime club about kind of spouting references to things to superficially feel like you belonged, which kind of permanently makes sure you won't actually feel like you belong. And that is my criticism. I don't begrudge anyone for wanting to feel included. It's just that you're preventing actually being included by purposefully going out of your way to create a situation where people can't possibly engage except superficially. So to say these edgeisms is to permanently prevent the thing you actually want from ever coming your way, and kind of take the cheap, momentary seeming way out. Which is why I say I feel like if people really understood what was going on, they would categorically not do it. There is no valid reason to do it, you might say. However, what about the other clubs at my college, huh? I mean, what were the people in there doing? Were there deep philosophical inquiries about the nature of the soul? Not that that's like particularly more deep. But you know, I mean, they did something together. I guess some of them. Did they? I mean, there are some that the club is about doing a thing. But I remember I went to a little meeting of people that were interested in founding a beekeeping club. I thought that was something I might enjoy. And I very quickly realized that there would be no beekeeping. The bees were a lie. This was just people who wanted to say that they wanted to appear like they wanted to do something like that. I suspect a few people went on very shallow first dates after that club meeting. I left after 15 minutes because it was just people popping off about their environmentalism. They had no intention of discussing actually doing something, and there never was a beekeeping club. And that is the same thing. It is the same thing. So even though on the immediate level, the Chunibyo, Chunisms, yelling these edgy things seems like a you know, some particular brand, and can sometimes be depicted as being like this incredibly nerdy, inferior, ultimately shallow form of attention seeking. It's like not, though, in a way. I mean, I would kind of rather you just make it clear that that is what you are trying to do. You know what I mean? Rather than, it's almost like the people at the beekeeping club are like tricking someone who actually wants to do beekeeping into like thinking that they are being sincere about something. You know what I mean? I would sort of rather it was just more clear. The anime club, I left after 5 minutes because it was easier to tell that I wasn't going to enjoy myself. Like, that's kind of better, you know? And they are sort of the same thing. Everything that both parties are saying is vapid and pointless. And so, like, why not just like wear that? You know what I mean? Is that really worse? It's not good, but is that worse? Okay, and then here's the other thing. Have you seen the society we live in? I mean, the implication that you shouldn't just seek attention and instead get real attention, I guess, is to imply that the thing that let's say I'm telling you not to take the cheap way out. I'm telling you that if you like live a life that you're, you know, putting some effort into, and you try to have good things in your life rather than just taking the cheap way out, you will get a like healthy amount of attention. You'll have a actually good social connections that will be built based on like stuff actually about you, instead of just saying things that kind of force people to pay attention, basically. The yelling edgy things thing might get people's attention. But also, again, I'm conflating that with people who kind of socially posture. It's like when people say, well, you can't be against, you know, sustainability, like that's untenable, you know, so you have to be interested in this subject. It's like, no, because you are taking the piss out of this subject. I am going to, you know, recycle or whatever, but you're not going to do beekeeping. So to act like, oh, if you're not interested in this, then you're somehow, you know, pissing all over the environment. No, you are in fact pissing all over me. I'm not into that. But it's okay if you are. I'm just going to leave now. And so the idea that if you don't do that, you will get like a healthy amount of attention or whatever, social interaction, security feeling. And then that will make you not want this type of attention seeking. Like, yeah, but have you seen our society nowadays? You won't get a healthy amount of like social interactions in our current society if you just like live a good life. Our society is broken and will not balance out your social needs. The needs of a human are not being met here. This is not a machine that is good for humans. This has become some kind of off the rails amalgam, the world that we live in. The easiest way to explain this concretely, if that feels a bit too abstract, is just like having enough friends. So something that may have come up in previous Parley is that I put a huge amount of energy in college into connecting with people that I wouldn't otherwise have connected with because something about that situation kind of lit a fire under my butt. Like, this is the last time, kind of the only time, that you will have a good social environment to actually meet people you have common ground with. Never before or since, has the world around me seemed to offer a good way to get to know people you actually have something in common with or have an affinity for. It's not really have something in common with. You can go to a pottery class, in your 30s or whatever, and meet people. It's not hard to meet people, but I think that selects for people who need to be close to more people, which is part of why a lot of them are doing the pottery class. I mean, no offense to pottery, some of them may be interested in pottery. But I don't think it selects for a very particular kind of person to be interested in specifically pottery. Art is like a kind of general category, I guess. They're interested in making things. I don't feel like pottery selects for an incredibly specific type of personality. I feel like most people who settle on an art form, it's because that's the one they settled on, not because it is the exactly perfectly calculated fit for their personality. That's very cynical, but I do think that's arguable, but that's a topic for another time. So I don't think that selects for much. And people who need to be close to someone is not a good thing to select for because they will not be able to just be themselves. The stakes are too high. They need to merely want to be close to someone. I am outlining, as I describe my concerns about getting attention so you have enough people in your life, basically my criteria for what makes for a good connection. Not needing it is one of them. Lower stakes. Having every ability to leave, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't think that if you have no social connections, except if you do a late night poor pottery class, I don't mean to bag on that so much. It's just an example. If you have to do that to get social connections, that's not already disqualified as far as I'm concerned. It can't be that the thing is too easy to be shallow about. So a lot of gaming culture can be a problem here. It's very easy to seem connected with other people and just like say the things, and it will seem like you are doing the thing and you will be included in a sort of mechanical way, which I think is kind of a problem. It means that it can stay superficial. That can kind of just be your personality. We've all met people who, one hobby of theirs, like basically just is their entire personality. So yeah, that I don't think that works either. Now, can you possibly have good connections with people in these ways? I mean, I can't say you can't, because everybody is going to be thinking of their own example of like, I met someone through some social contrivance and we ended up being great friends. Like, I'm not telling you that didn't happen or that your friendship that is good doesn't exist. I'm just saying that were we trying to lay out theoretically good conditions for getting close to people, those would not be them. That's all I'm trying to say. If it went well in spite of that, that's fantastic. It does from time to time, obviously. If you just keep doing that over and over again, eventually, sure, fine, like you'll connect with someone. And there's also, it's not like there's shallow and then deep connections, obviously. A lot of them are going to be in the middle. They're not extremely permanently surface level, and they're also not like the essence of the other person's soul or whatever. Finally, it really is a topic for another time, but it's not like it's been demonstrated yet by me or anyone else that it is so good to be so close to like a meaningful amount of other people. I think it, having done it myself, I think it fairly obviously is, but it would take some time to try to demonstrate that. So let's focus on the attention-seeking thing. My point is to try to get attention, to like have there be people around you, to be noticed or remembered. The idea that like doing that in a really shallow, direct way is bad is actually surprisingly complicated, in my opinion. First of all, people who do it in a more subtle way are kind of worse. And second of all, you sort of do need to do that, is the argument I'm trying to make. I am, for the sake of fun, I guess, trying to play devil's advocate for my own dislike of people's attention seeking. What else are you supposed to do? Yeah. And I had been saying this whole time in my life, well, you're meant to like do things that matter to you actually, and then find people who also care about those things with you, not just kind of yell meaninglessness and get attention that by kind of forcing people to. But doing the thing I'm recommending does not work, doesn't work. I mean, it's not an option, basically. And so, like, what exactly am I recommending here? So let's engage with it a little bit more. I mean, what exactly is happening when people do the attention seeking? And then maybe we can find a better solution by the end, but I kind of doubt it. Let's read the next part. The idea that people are getting some superficial engagement or attention from passerby until it becomes background noise, PistilWhip continues, could explain why Jukun in the I can't understand what you're saying thing, why his brand of Chunism also involves seemingly random mentions of external concepts like religion, mythology, and various sciences. By changing the wavelength of his background noise, he can make it more difficult to be tuned out. Or to put it another way, changing up his routine invites observers to wonder, what is he up to this time, allowing him to retain their attention. This is an interesting claim. I've never really heard it quite put like this. The idea that varying it up is sort of a way to like a police siren that changes pitch so that you don't block it out as easily. This is interesting. I think that it actually, for me, plays into the real reason why the Chunisms are bad. But you taught me this by saying that thing. So I'm quite excited about this parlay, actually, because I really learned something about what I think about this subject from this one, which I was completely selfishly is just why I'm doing this for a living. Like, that's why it's fun for me. And so I'm going to tell you about that. But I slightly tricked you all, audience, a little bit. I actually don't have much further positive to say about this approach. The situation we were in rhetorically before was that I had previously been pretty harsh against people who are attention seeking like this. And the reason was that I felt like it was clear that they were just doing the shallow version that prevented them from having the good version of the thing they wanted. Except that trying to get the good version of the thing they want kind of doesn't work, I know, because I've done the thing that I would say other people should do, and it is inadequate to fulfill, I had to go way further to fulfill my social needs than I would ever expect anyone to go. And I actually still think it's a pretty depressing part of 21st century life. You have to do preposterous things to have a meaningful amount of meaningful connections with other people that I would never expect anyone to do. And I'm a person who's been pretty well off with that stuff, right? Like, my setup for finding people that, you can just be close to, and it can just be anyone. It's not people you're stuck with. It's just whoever you want. My situation is so stacked for that. I went to like pretty nice schools. I had my parents were like not in particular problematic. They were, good parents. I kind of got to do what I wanted to some extent. I got a good amount of freedom. I went to a liberal arts school, so that's selected for a relatively wide type of person. I didn't, choose to go to a more particular school before I really knew who I was as a person, which would have trapped me to only those people. But I had the freedom to choose to do that as well. It might not have been as secure for my parents, right? I went to a school that kind of doesn't teach you any single marketable skill from the outset. They just had to hope that it would work out. That was brave of them, by the way. Thank you. And it would have been essentially the death of the person I am now if you hadn't let me do that. So thank you, parents. That was a good choice, I think, but probably pretty scary. And then I had enough free time because I naturally retain minutia very easily. So education is trivial to get by. I can get B's and A minuses or whatever with no effort. Just genetically, but through no merit of my own. I just got lucky and I can do that. So I could spend all of my time, basically literally all of my time, trying to get to know like other people that seemed interesting to me. Or I sent people a lot of notes, like I'd write people a letter, sometimes misconstrued as a love letter because I was an idiot, but I wasn't enough of an idiot to not try. That would have been even worse, I think. I don't feel I hurt anyone by saying, hey, you seem cool. Can we hang out? I don't think that that is offensive as long as you take no for an answer. And thus I did several times, but also met a lot of cool people that I would not have met otherwise. And I did that basically nonstop for 4 years. And that is the only reason that I am at all existing in the current form that I am now. That is essentially impossible for almost everybody else in humanity to do. They just aren't even allowed to try. And I also found it ridiculously time consuming and difficult and stressful, and it only barely worked. Like, so it is more or less impossible to get like an adequate amount of attention, I would say. Not to toot my own horn, I'm trying to be thankful for my extreme privilege of a certain kind. More money, more problems is a sort of whole other discussion, but it's not that I have so much money. I don't, but I certainly had a fortunate upbringing, and I'm thankful for that. It's the only reason I have this perspective on this. Okay, the point is, the idea of changing the wavelength of the complaining, to me, kind of validates the problem with the attention seeking. Even though the alternative, trying to just genuinely connect with people, doesn't really work, like that doesn't really work, and so how can you begrudge people trying to get attention in a more shallow way? Well, there is actually further harm done by the attention seeking. And so although I have more sympathy than I did before, I still think it's pretty bad to do. It's just like not because there is some better thing to do. It's because it's more harmful than I thought at first. And I'm now going to explain why. You following me so far? So the next part is about that harm, basically. And it's pretty simple. I think that changing the wavelength kind of breaks people who actually want to understand you. I speak from my personal experience, at least. Here's how it works. When I'm in Twitch chat, this is the example I'm going to use. I think an element of good philosophical thinking is to not dismiss people out of hand. Just because you think you've heard this argument before, like you will hear the good version of it eventually if you dig further and don't just dismiss people. To dismiss people too quickly is the very superficialness that I'm suggesting avoiding. So when new people come into chat, I'm aware that they're going to respond. They're kind of gonna open up in very few ways, and it's past that will be who they really are, basically. And like a babbling brook running through the woods, Twitch chat is a surprisingly good place, I would argue. You might find that weird at first, to get people to open up about how they really are. Because you get to wear away day by day at people's, social mask a little bit. And the real things come out. If you have a very discussion-focused stream like I do, it could be used that way. Very few Twitch channels work that way. But I've seen that quite a bit. I've gotten a very particular versions of a lot of you by talking in Twitch chat for a long time. Not immediately, but over time. Anyway, the problem then is that when people say something weird, wanting to actually understand you, whoever you are in this example, it's probably not most of you, means I need to take what you're saying somewhat seriously and try to figure out what it is. But you aren't trying to communicate anything seriously. The purpose of the Chunibyo-isms is not to be understood, but to be noticed or remembered, which I will do automatically against my will no matter what you say. And so what's happening is I have to try to understand, even though the next step is I know there is nothing to understand, 95% of the time anyway. I also, through a philosophical view of this situation, think to myself, I feel like I know why you would say that. You know what I mean? And the core reason is because you are a person who needs attention and you're insecure, so you're getting it anonymously on the internet. And I know that that's a dead end and won't actually get you what you want. So it is categorically pointless to engage with that subject. But I kind of have to, because what if it isn't that, basically? If I just dismiss everything, I mean, A way I've put it in the past, when other people in my life in the past have accused me of like asking too much of people, is I have said, and I will say now, humans aren't enough then. Fine, including me. And I will continue to look for more and be disappointed all of the time. Whatever, too bad. And that is not largely what happens. It's worth looking. I would delightedly tell my past self and those people that accused me of that, because people actually are fascinating when they are uniquely able to open up. But you need a very specific cocktail of conditions for that to happen. So I will not stop looking, even though I know a good amount of the time that the person is almost certainly not actually trying to communicate anything. So I think the harm done here is that by communicating in a purposefully shallow and attention-seeking way, you force me in the context of a stream, but I think it applies to people in other situations too, to genuinely try to understand something that was really never fully meant to be understood. A kind of lighter shade of this problem happens much more often and is much more innocent. I don't really know what to say about this one. Where I always get a little anxious every time someone makes a reference to previous streams or like something in a game during my streams, because every time that happens, the person is either going to think I'm not aware of them if I don't call to it in some way, or other people are going to be confused if I do call to it in some way because they won't know the reference or whatever. And I kind of hate references because I feel like they're the enemy of understanding. They not only frequently aren't understood, they also often encourage people to pretend to understand, which is even worse than not understanding, in my opinion. The exact thing I'm trying to destroy is this feeling like people have to go to their club and posture instead of actually talking about themselves. And so in my mind, references to stuff are in a way the enemy of that. But the problem, you see, is that they're also kind of an acknowledgement of the person that's there. And there's some value to that that can be important. I think the middle ground here is usually to explain the reference, which is what I usually try to do. But I have to admit that it's nerve-wracking sometimes, or I feel like if somebody kind of references something indirectly, I feel like I immediately get flooded with social anxiety. Like, I'm not going to get the joke, and that's going to make everyone confused. Like, the person who said the thing will think I'm not paying attention, and everybody else will be confused about what I'm talking about because I don't know what I'm talking about. And there's no way out. I just have to ignore the person, or it's me emotionally. I usually just feel bad about doing that. And so I generally try and fail to figure out the thing. And you'll see this on the stream a lot. There's really no way out of that situation. I think the best you can do, at least the best I can think of at the moment, is what I've done, which is to have a career focused on thoroughly discussing things. Therefore, it's not really off of the mission. We're mission normal if I have to over-explain something that someone has said. That's just like what we do anyway. And so that's one of the reasons why I decided to do that. It's what I would want to do to relieve my, concern about the situation and try to have things be effective anyway. And so and I like doing it in theory. I don't like anxiety, but I like, discussing things. So why don't we just go into a bunch of detail? Thus, I feel like doing that more than is necessary is pretty bad. And it's specifically bad for the people who would try to genuinely understand someone, try to genuinely notice or remember, engage with someone, care about you, if you weren't kind of overloading the server of those people with vapid platitudes, basically. This is why I think, even though there really is no good solution, and I understand the desire to be noticed and remembered in this broken society that we live in, it's still very bad, in my opinion, to try to get other people's attention in a showy way. And I think that being as I guess, unadorned and direct as possible when communicating with people is very important, not because it's so bad to play around with language sometimes, but because it fundamentally breaks the social contract's ability to understand anyone. if a lot of people do that. No one can be understood if enough people decide to try to just get attention. If you read like large popular Twitch chats that aren't about engagement at all, basically the exact opposite of my channel, they are utter acid trip madness to read. Like no human communication is occurring here. It's weirdly wholesome how the most of that you get is often on like sexy chatting streams. The When you look at the Twitch front page and there's some stream going on, when it's like a big gaming stream, the chat is often like a hallucinogenic nightmare. And when it's like a sexy streamer, it's often like an attempt at actual conversation that's failing. You know, you can still follow what's going on. Like everyone awkward at a party, which I think is a lot better than the hallucinogenic nightmare. Go figure. But I don't know, this ended up just being a humble brag, but I'm bragging about you, all of you, and your like cool way of actually expressing yourselves, even though it's quite vulnerable to do so. Kudos on the stream. It's great that people do that. I didn't think that doing this for a living and trying to let people have the kind of social space I would have wanted, I guess, when I was, well, mostly when I was younger, I didn't think that was going to go so well. I sort of thought there wouldn't be enough people that cared about that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And yeah, this was an interesting look at this subject. I have definitely shifted my criticism of the Chunyism thing and of attention-seeking comments in general. It's not so much that they are the inferior version of a better approach you could totally do. They're not. There is no better approach you could do. The only problem is that they're harmful enough that I think that kind of makes up for it. And it kind of undoes themselves. The harm is to the people that would lead to the attention seekers' success. And so I do still think it's self-defeating, but just not in the same way as before, which I thought was pretty interesting. I hope this was interesting. PistilWhip, I mean, I took the parlay in the direction of the thing I had to say about it, so I hope that was all right. I will also re-clarify that this is the type of thing I had to say about the subject. Sort of enjoying the moment of the meme of the "I can't understand what you're saying" rant in the previous parlay, and then this is the level below that's like, but what's the deal? You know, what is the metagaming of that situation? And I hope I've presented it in a somewhat understandable way, as I see it anyway. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this was also a really depressing parlay because I said I feel like I have every ability to succeed socially, and yet I still have a pretty grim outlook on the subject. And so if people are feeling troubled by that in their lives, they probably feel like you're screwed, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't really want you to feel that way, if nothing else, just because it's like pointless. If you are screwed, feeling like you should give up isn't any better than like trying your best anyway. You got nothing else to do on this godforsaken planet. Huh. I'm not sure I have too much for you. I guess what I feel is that we are in a very rapidly changing society. And while I think a lot of those changes have caused problems socially, have created a world where, because there's such an endless flood of information, it's kind of impossible to do anything normal, healthy, I would argue, and get people's attention naturally. That has become like nearly impossible. We were at a time when I was in college, at least the beginning of when I was in college, where it was uncommon enough for people to just be like watching videos and scrolling TikTok on their phone all the time, like every single person, that when you walked around campus, you had social interactions with people quite readily. People were not quite as sucked in to those things. It was easier to be like the event in someone's day, is I guess another way to think of it. But that sounds like a really old man thing to say. So, nah, I mean, let's quit at the peak, right? We'll see how I did.